September 11, 2001, 8:00 a.m., New York City. The sun rises over Manhattan, casting long, golden streaks across the glass facades of the World Trade Center towers. The streets buzz with the ordinary rhythm of the morning commute, yellow taxis honking, the metallic clatter of subway trains beneath the sidewalks, the aroma of roasted coffee drifting from corner cafes. Office workers, suited and focused, shuffle through revolving doors, clutching briefcases and cell phones, unaware that history is about to pivot in the most catastrophic way imaginable. High above, on the 92nd floor of the North Tower, John Murphy, a systems analyst, sips his coffee while scanning emails. Beside him, his colleague Linda Tran hums softly, adjusting a stack of papers. Outside, the glass panes glint in the morning light. The city looks tranquil, ordinary, nothing hints at the chaos that is about to strike. At Logan International Airport, 17-year-old hijacker Mohammed Atta boards American Airlines Flight 11 with a backpack, a sharp focus in his eyes. The plane taxis to the runway, engines roaring to life, lifting into the sky with the precision of a well-rehearsed operation. Across town, United Airlines Flight 175 waits on its tarmac, carrying its own team of determined attackers. The orchestration is meticulous, the plan executed in silent, cold precision. On board Flight 11, passengers settle into their seats. Flight attendants greet them with smiles, unaware of the impending nightmare. The hum of the engines, the faint vibration through the cabin, and the soft chatter form a background to the ordinary morning routine. The unsuspecting travelers, sipping coffee, adjusting seatbelts, and glancing at overhead monitors, could not have anticipated that in less than an hour, the city's skyline would be transformed into a scene of horror. Below in Lower Manhattan, street vendors set up their carts, pedestrians navigate crosswalks, and construction crews hammer steel into the rising skyline. The air is crisp, carrying the distant scent of the East River. A pigeon flutters past a window, oblivious to the fate that awaits the city. The hum of life is steady, continuous, almost hypnotic, until it is shattered by a sound that no one could ignore. 8:46 a.m. The morning calm fractures. From the streets below, a distant roar grows into a thunderous metallic scream. Passers-by turn toward the North Tower, squinting against the rising smoke. A massive jet, American Airlines Flight 11, cuts through the clear sky, its wings slicing the air with terrifying precision. Time seems to slow as the plane crashes into the tower between the 93rd and 99th floors, exploding in a fireball that sends shards of glass and steel raining down onto the streets below. Inside the building, alarms blare. The heat hits first, a sudden wave of blistering air and choking smoke. John Murphy drops his coffee, the ceramic shattering against the marble floor, and lunges toward the stairwell. Linda Tran yells over the roar, her voice strained as she grabs her purse and emergency pack. The walls vibrate with the force of the impact, and the acrid scent of burning jet fuel fills every corridor. Phones ring frantically, lines overloaded as confusion spreads like wildfire. Outside, people flee in all directions, their screams merging with the wail of sirens. Office papers swirl through the air like confetti caught in a storm. Firefighters arrive, sliding down poles, donning gear, their eyes reflecting both courage and disbelief. Captain James Rodriguez, leading Engine 7, rallies his crew. "Form up, get inside, we're going in." They push against the heat, against gravity itself, moving toward the inferno that seems impossible to survive. Above, on the impacted floors, chaos reigns. Workers are trapped, doors jammed, stairwells engulfed in smoke. Some cling to shattered windows, hopping for rescue, while others form impromptu chains, helping colleagues down the remaining stairwells. The roar of the building creaking under stress is punctuated by explosions as fuel-fed fires ignite interior materials. Panic, courage, and desperation collide in an invisible battlefield fought by civilians and first responders alike. Media helicopters hover nearby, capturing the scene in real time. Thick black smoke trails toward Brooklyn, a rising column of destruction visible for miles. Onlookers in Battery Park and across the bridges stop mid-stride, eyes wide, cameras trembling in their hands. The city is suspended between disbelief and terror, a metropolis suddenly confronting its vulnerability in the most visceral way imaginable. 9:03 a.m. The city barely has time to process the first horror when the sky rumbles again. United Airlines Flight 175 tears through the morning air, barreling toward Manhattan with the inevitability of a falling mountain. Commuters freeze, heads snapping skyward as the jet slams into the South Tower between the 77th and 85th floors. A second eruption of fire and steel sends a shockwave through streets, offices, and subways, shaking the city's spine. Inside the South Tower, chaos erupts instantly. Alarms shriek louder than before. Office workers struggle to orient themselves as smoke thickens, licking ceilings and stairwells. Susan Lee, a receptionist on the 60th floor, grabs her colleagues' hands, guiding them toward emergency exits as the floor trembles beneath their feet. Windows explode inward, rain of glass glittering in the blinding heat. The acrid smell of burning paper and plastic burns throats, and visibility drops to mere feet in corridors thick with smoke. On the streets, pedestrians are thrown to the ground by the concussion. Cars swerve, horns blare, and asphalt is dotted with debris, paper, metal, personal belongings from above. Emergency crews race toward both towers. Firefighters, paramedics, and police officers form a human chain against destruction, but the scale of the attack overwhelms even the most trained. Captain Rodriguez radios updates: multiple floors, heavy smoke, evacuate what you can, keep moving. From rooftops in nearby buildings, office workers watch the infernos consuming the skyline. Jet fuel-fed fires twist stairwells into death traps, forcing people to make impossible choices: descend into smoke, risk jumping, or wait for rescue that may never come. Helicopters circle frantically, reporters' voices narrating events as if the entire world is holding its breath. Smoke spirals upward, black and thick, blotting out the sun. Meanwhile, inside the towers, the sense of time stretches, seconds drawn into eternity. Desperate calls for help clog emergency lines. Families listen helplessly as loved ones describe the unbearable heat, the collapsing ceiling tiles, the chaos of human bodies pressed against one another in stairwells. Each step down becomes a battle for air and footing. The South Tower, now ablaze, trembles under the impact, creaking ominously as the city's nightmare escalates. 9:59 a.m. The North Tower, standing like a monolith against the morning sky just over an hour ago, begins to betray its strength. From the streets below, the rumble starts as a low, distant vibration, subtle at first like the growl of an unseen beast beneath the city. Then in an instant, the sound becomes a deafening roar. Glass shatters in unison, windows exploding outward like fireworks in reverse. Dust and ash surge into the air, momentarily obscuring the sun, turning Manhattan into a twilight of smoke and fire despite the mid-morning hour. On the streets, the impact is immediate. Office workers who had just evacuated moments earlier pause in terror, eyes widening as the upper floors of the tower collapse inward. Pedestrians trip over themselves, fleeing as a cloud of debris expands outward with terrifying speed. Concrete, steel, and paper spiral downwards, striking cars, street signs, and the occasional unfortunate bystander with a force that leaves nothing untouched. The roar of destruction is punctuated by screaming, shouting, and the metallic grinding of steel beams twisting like molten metal. Firefighters are among the first to respond in real time, pushing against the thickening debris cloud. Captain James Rodriguez and his team brace against the wind of falling rubble, forcing themselves forward to aid trapped civilians. Smoke fills lungs, eyes sting. Voices are lost in the cacophony of collapsing metal and sirens. Hose lines are torn from hands by the turbulence of falling masonry. Paramedics drag injured survivors into alleys, their uniforms smeared with ash, cuts, and blood. Inside the North Tower, the scenario is one of unrelenting horror. Those on upper floors, unable to escape in time, face a cacophony of collapsing ceilings, broken elevators, and stairwells engulfed in flame. Fire escapes groan under weight, some giving way entirely, sending people tumbling in a desperate attempt to survive. Michael Green, an IT manager on the 96th floor, clutches a colleague's hand as he navigates through thick smoke, the heat blistering exposed skin. Every breath sears his lungs, each step threatens to bring the building down upon them. Phones continue to ring, though lines are weak. Frantic voices describe the heat, the fire, the impossibility of escape. Outside, emergency responders attempt to coordinate amidst the dust cloud that has transformed the city into a near-apocalyptic scene. Police officers, typically disciplined and controlled, are forced into rapid triage, guiding panicked civilians through streets blanketed in ash and debris. Fire trucks tip precariously as chunks of concrete and steel rain down upon them, leaving gouges and scratches on hardened metal. Helicopters orbit overhead, struggling to maintain position, documenting what appears to be the unthinkable: the collapse of one of the world's most iconic buildings. Meanwhile, atop nearby skyscrapers, office workers look down on the devastation. Mark Thompson, a financial analyst, leans against a windowpane, his reflection ghostly against the gray cloud. He watches as the tower falls, the shockwave hitting with brutal force, knocking people off their feet and scattering dust across rooftops. Cameras flash as reporters narrate live, their voices trembling with disbelief and horror. Streets are no longer streets, they are a battlefield of rubble, injured civilians, and dust-choked heroes moving with remarkable determination. The collapse triggers a chain reaction. Electrical lines snap, fires ignite in surrounding buildings, elevators fail catastrophically, trapping those inside. Smoke from the North Tower carries into the South Tower, which is already ablaze from the earlier plane strike. The heat radiates outward, melting street signage and warping glass. The acrid smell of burning steel and jet fuel pervades every corner of Lower Manhattan. Amid the chaos, acts of heroism emerge with stark clarity. Firefighters form human chains to carry injured survivors through the haze. Paramedics lift children, their small bodies covered in dust, soot, and tears. Bystanders, ordinary citizens, pull people from crushed cars and debris, ignoring the danger to themselves. One man covered in ash drags a coworker out from under a beam, pausing only to wipe blood from his eyes before moving forward. Each movement is a calculated risk, a battle between instinct and survival. Inside the remaining tower, the South Tower, the sense of dread is palpable. Individuals watch the North Tower fall, the shockwave rattling their offices and apartments. People cling to windows, unsure whether to flee into stairwells that may not hold them or remain hopping to survive. The heat and smoke intensify, warping walls, igniting paper, sending the smell of fire into every corridor. A sense of surreal disbelief mixes with terror. These are ordinary office workers, suddenly thrust into a war zone. From the perspective of air traffic controllers and law enforcement, the situation is a nightmare unfolding in real time. Flight patterns are disrupted, communications are jammed with incoming distress calls. The Federal Aviation Administration scrambles to ground other planes, issuing unprecedented orders that ripple through the skies. Pilots and controllers navigate a fog of panic, trying to maintain order as the city below collapses into chaos. In streets further away, citizens pour out of subway stations, coughing, squinting through thick dust clouds. Taxi drivers abandon their vehicles, grabbing pedestrians to help them away from falling debris. Street vendors and commuters merge into a single unorganized mass, driven by the same instinct, survival. Emergency sirens pierce the air, but their clarity is drowned by the relentless roar of destruction, the collapse echoing through canyons of steel and glass. Among the rubble, temporary sanctuaries form. Firefighters use vehicles as shields, guiding civilians behind them as the dust cloud moves like a living entity through the city. The heat is relentless and the smoke disorients, yet determination fuels every step. Amid the horror, small details stand out. A briefcase left behind on the sidewalk, a child's shoe near the curb, papers fluttering like ghostly reminders of the lives interrupted. Above the city, helicopters continue documenting the devastation. The black smoke rises like a pillar, visible from every borough. On State Island, Brooklyn, and Queens, people watch television broadcasts in disbelief, some rushing toward the bridges, others calling loved ones, unable to fully comprehend the scale. The North Tower, once a symbol of modernity and economic might, is now a hollowed, smoking ruin, its shadow stretching over a city transformed in moments. Amid the chaos, first responders are relentless. Captain Rodriguez leads his crew deeper into the cloud, pulling people from the wreckage, fighting disorientation, heat, and fear. Smoke obscures vision, debris cuts skin and clothing. And the risk of additional collapse is omnipresent. Each step is a calculated decision between helping one more civilian or retreating to safety. A firefighter carries a young woman, her clothes torn, face blackened by soot. Her gratitude is lost in the roar of the city, yet the act itself embodies the human response to catastrophe. Meanwhile, in makeshift triage areas on streets cleared by volunteers and police, paramedics and medical personnel struggle to prioritize care. Burned, crushed, and stunned individuals arrive in waves. Water is scarce, the heat unrelenting, and panic infectious. Yet there is method within the madness, training, instinct, and courage combining to preserve life amidst unprecedented destruction. The dust cloud from the North Tower's collapse continues to spread, engulfing surrounding streets and neighborhoods. Glass shards embed themselves in building facades, cars, and human flesh alike. The tactile sense of Manhattan has changed. Air once crisp with the scent of the river is now a choking mix of smoke, concrete dust, and charred materials. The roar of sirens, the shriek of collapsing metal, and the panic cries of civilians form a symphony of catastrophe. Above it all, the South Tower continues to burn, its windows reflecting the hellish glow of fire. Office workers trapped above the impact zones struggle to breathe, climb, and survive, aided only by the faint, desperate calls of rescuers below. The shock of the North Tower's collapse has changed the psychology of everyone in the city. Disbelief is now terror, and terror drives survival instincts in ways previously unimaginable. Helicopters continue to orbit, capturing footage for a world that cannot yet fully grasp what is happening. Television broadcasts struggle to relay information as the feeds become chaotic with urgent updates. Citizens across the nation watch in horror as their screens broadcast a city under siege from an invisible, airborne enemy. Mid the debris, pockets of human resilience persist. People trapped under smaller rubble manage to pull themselves free, aided by bystanders and emergency crews. The smell of smoke mixes with dust, sweat, and blood. Some survivors are in shock, others cry out for loved ones, their voices lost in the tumult. Each rescue is a battle against time and gravity, against the fear that another collapse could occur at any moment. As dust settles partially, the enormity of the disaster becomes clearer. Streets are impassable, sidewalks layered in debris, and the skyline permanently altered. The North Tower is gone, replaced by a smoking crater that reaches hundreds of feet into the sky. Surrounding buildings are damaged, some structurally compromised. Fires continue to burn, fed by ruptured fuel lines, office materials, and the wreckage itself. Yet even in the overwhelming destruction, a strange rhythm emerges. Firefighters, police, and paramedics move in coordinated chaos, pulling survivors, treating injuries, and maintaining whatever order they can impose. Civilians aid where possible, forming impromptu chains, guiding each other away from danger. The human instinct to survive and protect manifests in countless small acts of heroism. From rooftops and windows, photographers and reporters capture the scale of the disaster. Images of the North Tower's collapse spread across the globe within minutes, shocking the world. The streets, once teeming with ordinary life, are now a battlefield of ash, steel, and human determination, fury from the skies and courage in the air. 9:37 a.m. Across the Potomac, Arlington, Virginia, is suddenly transformed by an unseen terror. The Pentagon, heart of the nation's military command, shudders violently as American Airlines Flight 77 rips into its western facade. The wall crumbles outward in an instant, a fiery eruption consuming offices, hallways, and conference rooms. Smoke surges skyward, acrid and black, filling the morning air with the smell of burning jet fuel and scorched concrete. Inside, soldiers, civilian employees, and officers scramble in panic, diving beneath desks and into hallways as debris rains down. The sound of steel twisting echoes through the building, mingling with screams of pain and disbelief. Emergency responders arrive within minutes, sirens wailing through streets already teeming with morning traffic. Arlington fire crews, unprepared for a strike of such scale, coordinate with Pentagon security and local police to stabilize the scene, pull the wounded from the wreckage, and contain fires spreading from ruptured fuel lines. Colonel David Mitchell, directing efforts from a nearby parking lot, barks orders over the roar of the inferno. Rescue teams north side, evacuate any survivors. Keep moving, dust and ash coat the streets, and every breath tastes of fire and molten metal. Meanwhile, in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, United Airlines Flight 93 hurtles through the skies. On board, passengers have learned from phone calls about the attacks in New York and Washington. Panic is palpable, yet it quickly transforms into resolve. Led by Todd Beamer, Mark Bingham, Tom Burnett, and other courageous passengers, a plan emerges. They will not allow the hijackers to reach their intended target. The hum of the engines, the vibration of the fuselage, and the smell of recycled air and fear pervade the cabin. Todd whispers into a phone, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Let's roll." A struggle erupts in the cabin. The passengers coordinate attacks on the hijackers, fighting through panic, terror, and the unrelenting weight of the situation. Metal groans, luggage is flung aside, and the cockpit becomes a battleground. Shouts mix with the whine of engines, the impact of fists on bodies, and the occasional metallic clash of equipment. The hijackers, realizing the passengers will not submit, attempt desperate maneuvers, but the resolve of ordinary Americans transforms into extraordinary courage. Back in Manhattan, the South Tower continues to burn, a living testament to the first strike and the North Tower collapse. Inside, offices above the impact zone are engulfed in fire and smoke. Stairwells are blocked, elevators destroyed. People press against walls, gagging on thick smoke, trying to find paths to safety. Survivors below watch in horror, fearing the inevitable after witnessing the North Tower's destruction. Emergency crews push forward despite fatigue, each step a confrontation with death. 9:59 a.m. News feeds relay the North Tower's collapse as the city braces for the worst. In the South Tower, workers realize time is slipping away. Smoke rises thicker, fire spreads faster, and the structural integrity weakens under heat and stress. Phones buzz with last messages to loved ones, each word heavy with urgency and desperation. Michael Green, who had survived part of the North Tower impact, now faces another inferno. He grips a coworker's hand, guiding them downward through the haze, hoping to outrun fate that has already claimed so much. Above, helicopters capture the South Tower engulfed in flames, the smoke billowing toward the sky in massive black clouds. Reporters narrate live, their voices trembling, unable to fully convey the scale of destruction. Bridges leading into Manhattan are clogged with fleeing civilians. Streets are choked with abandoned vehicles, debris, and scattered personal items. Shoes, briefcases, papers, fragments of lives interrupted. Firefighters coordinate rescues with limited visibility, calling out directions and guiding trapped survivors through the dense ash cloud. Meanwhile, the Pentagon burns relentlessly. Inside, soldiers and employees assist those injured by the initial impact, dragging colleagues out of corridors, covering faces from smoke, and moving against heat waves licking hallways. Firefighters maneuver hoses into shattered offices, dousing flames while pulling injured personnel to safety. Outside, medics triage the wounded, stabilizing those with burns, broken bones, and smoke inhalation. The sight of fire and destruction is surreal, juxtaposed against the normality of the surrounding streets only moments earlier. In Shanksville, the passengers' heroic resistance continues. The cockpit door is breached, the plane lurching violently as the hijackers fight back. Todd Beamer's calm commands, Mark Bingham's strategic positioning, and the coordinated efforts of the group push the hijackers into defensive positions. The hum of the engines is replaced intermittently by the crash of bodies, the ripping of seat cushions, and the desperate shouts echoing through the cabin. In a final act of bravery, the passengers force the plane downward. Its trajectory changes, avoiding Washington, D.C., a city that might have faced devastation far worse than imagined. The engines roar one final time before the plane impacts an open field with a thunderous crash, sending a fireball into the Pennsylvania sky, visible for miles. Back in New York, 10:28 a.m. The South Tower's collapse is imminent. Inside, workers face corridors of smoke, walls warped by heat, and stairwells that groan under stress. Firefighters, aware of the structural instability, call for evacuation, but thousands remain trapped. Heat waves push down floors, smoke engulfs every hallway, and a low, ominous rumble begins to reverberate through the building's steel skeleton. Outside, crowds gather at safer distances, watching history repeat itself in horrifying symmetry. As the tower buckles, the sound of twisting metal and shattering glass merges with screams and sirens. Firefighters shield civilians, dragging them away from falling debris. Dust clouds envelop streets, vehicles, and buildings, coating everything in a gray-white haze. Ash swirls and eddies, carried by wind, infiltrating lungs and eyes. Emergency radios crackle with updates, commands, and cries for assistance. Each second is measured against the ticking of a clock that seems to race toward an inevitable conclusion. In Lower Manhattan, the human cost is visible in every corner. Injured survivors lie on sidewalks covered in dust and blood. Paramedics work frantically, triaging, bandaging, and providing oxygen. Bystanders help where they can, moving rubble aside, comforting those in shock. Streets resemble a battlefield with overturned vehicles, shattered glass, and fragments of buildings creating an improvised obstacle course. Helicopters continue to circle, broadcasting the scene to a world struggling to comprehend the scale of disaster. Simultaneously, Arlington remains engulfed in smoke and fire. Emergency crews continue to navigate treacherous conditions, pulling personnel from the Pentagon's wreckage. The smell of scorched materials mixed with fuel and ash pervades every breath. Structural engineers on site call out warnings as sections of the building become unstable. Medics work tirelessly, treating burns, fractures, and respiratory trauma, while coordinating transport to hospitals overwhelmed with casualties. Flight 93's crash site becomes a scene of both devastation and reverence. First responders arrive to find the wreckage still smoldering. Bodies, fragments of the fuselage, and debris litter the field. Despite the chaos, there is an unmistakable sense of heroism. Passengers sacrificed themselves to prevent a catastrophe in Washington, D.C. Investigators later reconstruct their courage, piecing together the final phone calls, heroic plans, and ultimate selflessness that averted even greater loss. Back in Manhattan, survivors begin to emerge from the rubble and ash. Some are covered head to toe, their eyes reflecting disbelief. Others cry out for lost colleagues, friends, and family. Emergency responders, despite exhaustion and injury, continue operations, carrying injured civilians to triage points, administering first aid, and documenting scenes for later investigation. Fires burn on multiple floors of surrounding buildings, ignited by falling debris and intense heat. Bridges and tunnels leading into Manhattan are now filled with refugees of the disaster. Commuters, office workers, and tourists alike navigate streets and highways, carrying the injured and dazed. Traffic snarls, panic spreads, yet acts of heroism persist. Citizens hand out water, guide strangers to safety, and comfort those traumatized by what they have witnessed. In an instant, the city's identity transforms, from a hub of commerce and culture to a theater of survival, courage, and tragedy. From rooftops, photographers capture every moment. News helicopters continue their broadcasts, showing the South Tower's collapse in progress and the smoldering ruins of the North Tower. Across the globe, viewers watch in horror as live footage transmits the unimaginable reality. The fall of symbols, the bravery of ordinary people, and the devastating impact on the lives of thousands. In the Pentagon, chaos gradually transitions to organized rescue. Firefighters and medics continue their tireless efforts, navigating unstable floors, extinguishing fires, and carrying out the injured. Smoke and heat continue to challenge operations, but human determination overrides fear. Survivors share details with rescuers, guiding them to trapped colleagues, recounting the seconds and minutes of impact, and providing the crucial knowledge that allows further lives to be saved. Meanwhile, the city absorbs the psychological shock. New Yorkers, long accustomed to skyscrapers and subways, now face streets blanketed in ash, dust-filled air, and the haunting silhouettes of towers reduced to rubble. Yet amid despair, resilience emerges. Firefighters push forward, civilians offer aid, and the collective will to survive and help one another defines the city's response. The events of the morning: planes striking towers, towers collapsing, Pentagon impacted, passengers rising against hijackers, merge into a single narrative of terror, heroism, and human endurance. Lives are lost, yet countless acts of courage and sacrifice define the unfolding story. Streets, offices, highways, and skis are all theaters of human drama, from the smallest gestures to the largest acts of bravery. Midday, September 11, 2001. The air above lower Manhattan is thick with dust and smoke, casting an eerie gray pall over streets and skyscrapers alike. Sunlight struggles to pierce the dense haze, leaving everything in a surreal half-light. Ash settles on vehicles, sidewalks, and the faces of those fleeing. The acrid smell of burning steel and paper clings to clothing, hair, and lungs, making every breath a struggle. The once familiar streets of New York are unrecognizable, transformed into a vast theater of destruction, confusion, and human resilience. Emergency sirens echo across the boroughs, interweaving with the cries of civilians. Captain Rodriguez, helmet dented and coat singed, leads his crew through the maze of rubble where sidewalks once stood. Every step is calculated, every movement deliberate. One misstep could bring debris crashing down anew. Firefighters call out to survivors trapped beneath concrete slabs and fallen steel beams, their voices cutting through the haze. Paramedics form impromptu triage stations on sidewalks, using tarps, jackets, and whatever materials are at hand to shield victims from the lingering dust and debris. Oxygen tanks hiss rhythmically, bandages are tied tightly to stop bleeding, and water bottles are passed from hand to hand. Each action is urgent, measured against the realization that more collapses, fires, or explosions could occur at any moment. Inside nearby buildings that survived the collapse, office workers emerge from basements and stairwells covered in dust, soot, and blood. Some carry injured colleagues, others cling to the arms of strangers, their movements guided by instinct and adrenaline. The sounds of metal groaning, glass cracking, and distant shouts create an unrelenting sensory backdrop. The city's normal rhythm, subway announcements, taxi horns, and chatter, has been replaced by chaos and survival. From rooftops and upper floors of surrounding buildings, photographers and reporters capture the aftermath. Smoke rises from both the north and south towers' former sites, forming massive plumes visible for miles. Helicopters hover, documenting the scene, their cameras zooming in on rescuers and civilians alike. News broadcasts struggle to convey the scale of destruction, with live footage showing collapsed streets, emergency crews at work, and clouds of dust spreading like a tidal wave across lower Manhattan. Amid the chaos, acts of heroism continue to unfold. Firefighters form human chains, pulling survivors from rubble. Civilian volunteers guide the injured to triage areas, offering water, blankets, and reassurance. A construction worker drags a trapped woman free from a partially collapsed building, her sobs punctuating the roar of sirens. Another rescuer lifts a young boy from under debris, soot streaked across his small face, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Emergency coordination centers are flooded with calls. Police officers, firefighters, and paramedics communicate with one another over radios, struggling to maintain situational awareness as new fires flare and structural instability threatens secondary collapses. Commanders issue orders rapidly, dispatching teams to areas with the highest likelihood of survivors while constantly reassessing risks. The scale of devastation complicates every decision, yet human determination propels responders forward. Across the East River in Brooklyn and Queens, citizens watch the smoke rise, faces pale with shock. The skyline they once knew symbols of commerce, ambition, and progress is now marked by voids, gaping holes where once proud towers stood. Children cling to parents, some too young to comprehend fully, while adults struggle to process the enormity of what has occurred. Phones ring constantly as families attempt to locate loved ones, many of whom are trapped in offices, streets, or damaged transit systems. The Pentagon, still smoldering, faces its own series of challenges. Smoke and flames engulf multiple floors and structural damage is significant. Soldiers and civilian employees emerge from corridors, their faces blackened with soot, clothing torn or burned. Emergency responders push through heat and smoke to evacuate the wounded. Firefighters lay hoses into corridors, dousing pockets of fire while carefully navigating debris-strewn hallways. Medics prioritize injuries with precision, treating burns, fractures, and respiratory trauma amidst the lingering scent of jet fuel. In Shanksville, Pennsylvania, first responders arrive at the site of Flight 93. The open field is a scene of both devastation and awe. The fuselage is broken and charred, fire still smoldering, debris scattered across acres. Local emergency crews coordinate with state police and federal investigators to secure the site, recover bodies, and collect evidence. Despite the horror, there is recognition of the passengers' heroism. Ordinary citizens who, faced with unimaginable terror, overpowered hijackers to prevent further catastrophe. Investigators later reconstruct the timeline of the final moments on board, piecing together a narrative of courage and selflessness that saved countless lives in Washington, D.C. Back in New York, lower Manhattan streets are transformed into zones of survival and operation. Civilians, injured but mobile, stagger along sidewalks and avenues, seeking aid or reunification with loved ones. Volunteers hand out bottled water and blankets, some using vehicles to ferry the injured to hospitals. Traffic is at a standstill, bridges jammed with those fleeing, but coordination slowly emerges amid the chaos. Even amidst destruction, the human instinct to help one another manifests in countless small actions, guiding a child through the rubble, handing out first aid, or simply offering words of reassurance. Smoke and dust are pervasive, infiltrating every nook and cranny of the city. Windows of nearby skyscrapers are coated with ash, HVAC systems draw the haze inside, and ventilation shafts carry it further, making every interior space a challenge to navigate. The smell of burning paper, fuel, and metal is overwhelming, yet responders and civilians alike push forward. Their senses are assaulted, but determination overrides exhaustion. Hospitals across Manhattan and surrounding boroughs are flooded with victims. Medical staff operate under extreme conditions, treating burns, crush injuries, and smoke inhalation while grappling with the sheer volume of patients. Operating rooms work around the clock, triaging urgent cases and providing life-saving care. Makeshift triage centers emerge in nearby schools, community centers, and even churches, staffed by doctors, nurses, and volunteers from across the city. On rooftops, vantage points offer both perspective and horror. Entire blocks are blanketed in ash, steel, and debris. Emergency crews navigate streets that have become labyrinths of rubble. Civilians peer down from high floors, observing both destruction and heroism in equal measure. Smoke continues to rise from pockets of fire, carried by wind across the skyline, visible from Brooklyn, Queens, and even parts of New Jersey. In the hours following the attacks, the magnitude of human loss begins to crystallize. Hundreds are unaccounted for, trapped in rubble or burned buildings. Families watching news coverage struggle to comprehend the enormity of the tragedy. Parents search desperately for children, spouses for partners, colleagues for coworkers. Each revelation of death or injury sends ripples of grief across the city and eventually across the nation. Federal and state agencies mobilize rapidly. FEMA, National Guard units, and federal law enforcement coordinate with local authorities to provide support. Evacuation routes are established, hospitals receive additional personnel, and rescue operations are prioritized for areas most likely to yield survivors. Communications networks, strained by overwhelming calls, gradually stabilize to provide the coordination necessary for large-scale rescue and recovery. Internationally, the attacks shock the world. News spreads across continents in real time, with footage of collapsing towers broadcast to millions. Governments convene emergency meetings, intelligence agencies scramble to assess threats, and citizens globally react with disbelief, sorrow, and solidarity. Memorials begin to form spontaneously in foreign cities, with people lighting candles, leaving flowers, and holding vigils in honor of those lost. In Lower Manhattan, recovery operations continue throughout the afternoon and evening. Firefighters, police officers, and volunteers push deeper into debris, searching for survivors amidst unstable piles of rubble and metal. Each step is measured, each decision critical. Dust clouds still hang in the air, impairing vision, making every movement a challenge. Yet despite exhaustion, the human drive to rescue and save persists with remarkable intensity. Amid this chaos, stories of courage emerge. Office workers who survived initial impacts help neighbors descend stairwells. Civilians risk their own safety to guide injured strangers through streets blanketed with ash. Firefighters rappel down shattered windows to reach those trapped above street level. Every act, from the smallest gesture to life-saving interventions, contributes to a collective effort of survival, bravery, and humanity in the face of overwhelming disaster. The scale of the attacks leaves lasting marks on the city's landscape. Streets remain blocked by rubble, damaged vehicles, and debris from the fallen towers. Fires continue to burn in pockets, and smoke permeates the air well into the evening. Hospitals operate at maximum capacity, shelters are established for displaced civilians, and emergency services continue round-the-clock operations. Amidst the physical devastation, psychological trauma begins to take root. Survivors, witnesses, and responders alike grapple with shock, grief, and disbelief. Emergency mental health teams mobilize to provide support, counseling, and stabilization, recognizing that the human toll extends far beyond physical injuries. Families wait anxiously for news of missing loved ones, communities come together to offer support, and a city once thriving with routine is now united by shared trauma and resilience. In airports and cities across the United States, air travel halts, communication networks are flooded, and national security measures are tightened. Citizens watch in real time as the narrative of heroism, destruction, and survival unfolds. Governments respond with emergency protocols, security screenings, and crisis management plans, signaling a shift in national consciousness and the beginning of a global war on terror. Through the smoke, ash, and chaos, the human spirit persists. Civilians continue to guide, support, and protect one another. Emergency crews, exhausted but undeterred, move tirelessly through streets and buildings, performing the impossible with courage and determination. Survivors emerge from rubble, dazed yet alive, embodying the resilience that defines the city and its people. Even as dusk approaches, the city remains in turmoil. Fires continue to smolder, dust settles in layers across every surface, and the air remains thick with the scent of destruction. Rescue operations continue, guided by the combined efforts of trained professionals and ordinary citizens who rise to extraordinary challenges. Every action contributes to the unfolding story of heroism, sacrifice, and survival on a scale unprecedented in modern history. Survivors rebuilding and a world responding. As the afternoon of September 11th stretches into early evening, Lower Manhattan remains a city cloaked in dust, ash, and smoke. Sunlight barely penetrates the haze, casting a grayish pall over the wreckage of streets, sidewalks, and the skeletal remains of the Twin Towers. Emergency responders continue their relentless search for survivors, navigating precarious piles of steel beams, shattered glass, and crumbled concrete. The air is thick with a choking mixture of smoke, pulverized concrete, and the acrid scent of melted office materials. Every breath feels like a challenge, every step a risk, yet determination drives them forward. On Fulton Street, Maria Hernandez, a secretary who survived the South Tower impact, staggers through ash-covered streets, clutching her young niece tightly. Her suit is torn, hair streaked with soot, eyes wide with disbelief as she navigates a maze of overturned vehicles and scattered debris. Volunteers hand her bottled water and guide her toward makeshift triage stations. The city, in the aftermath of unparalleled chaos, begins to take shape not as the world knew it, but as a testament to human resilience. Inside the remaining skyscrapers surrounding Ground Zero, survivors who had evacuated the towers moments before the collapse regroup. Office workers share stories of escape, the stairwell that buckled under weight, the smoke that choked lungs, and the screams of those left behind. Each narrative, unique in detail, paints a mosaic of human instinct, courage, and sheer will to survive. People embrace, cry, and console one another, their shared trauma forging temporary bonds of solidarity amidst ruin. Captain Rodriguez, alongside his exhausted team, continues leading rescue efforts with precision. His eyes scan every crevice of the rubble, listening for faint sounds of movement beneath tons of concrete. Shouts of survivors echo faintly through the haze, providing fragile hope amid devastation. Firefighters and police officers communicate via radio, coordinating their movements to avoid further structural collapses. Hose lines are stretched over broken streets, supplying water to flames still licking at damaged buildings. The first hours after the collapse are chaotic, yet patterns of survival emerge. Civilians form human chains, lifting debris, moving the injured, and offering guidance. A young man barely 20 assists a woman trapped beneath a section of collapsed sidewalk, his hands blackened with soot and ash. Nearby, a group of construction workers uses beams as levers to free an elderly man pinned under rubble. Each act of courage and collaboration underscores the extraordinary human response to catastrophe. Across the city, hospitals operate at unprecedented capacity. Emergency rooms overflow with victims suffering from burns, crush injuries, smoke inhalation, and lacerations. Doctors and nurses work tirelessly, rotating shifts without rest, improvising triage stations in hallways and parking lots. Ambulances line streets, ferrying victims to hospitals across Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. Volunteers assist with logistics, transporting water, blankets, and supplies to those on the front lines. The sheer scale of medical response reflects both the magnitude of the tragedy and the indomitable human spirit. In Shanksville, Pennsylvania, families of Flight 93 passengers gather anxiously near the crash site, awaiting news of loved ones. As investigators and first responders secure the field, the reality of their heroism becomes apparent. Todd Beamer, Mark Bingham, Tom Burnett, and other passengers sacrificed their lives to prevent the plane from reaching Washington, D.C., a decisive action that echoes across the nation. Relatives weep openly, torn between grief and pride, as journalists document the story that embodies courage in its purest form. Back in Arlington, the Pentagon's structural damage requires careful assessment before full recovery operations can continue. Engineers and military personnel work in tandem, stabilizing weakened areas and ensuring that rescuers can enter safely. Firefighters extinguish lingering flames while medics treat smoke inhalation, burns, and injuries caused by debris. Employees who survived the initial strike recount moments of terror, the walls collapsing, offices engulfed in fire, and colleagues pulled from harm's way. Their testimonies provide insight into the human experience during moments of extreme crisis. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, volunteers continue to assist in the labyrinthine streets surrounding Ground Zero. Churches, community centers, and schools open their doors as shelters and medical stations. Citizens distribute food, water, clothing, and blankets, demonstrating a grassroots response to the immense human need. Even as rescue operations extend into the evening, the streets are filled with a mix of exhaustion, shock, and unwavering resolve. People speak in hushed tones, recounting near escapes, lost colleagues, and the surreal sight of towers reduced to rubble. The city's infrastructure bears the weight of the disaster. Subway lines remain partially suspended, streets are impassable in areas due to debris and emergency operations, and communications networks are strained under an unprecedented volume of calls. Yet amidst these logistical challenges, coordination improves as local authorities, federal agencies, and volunteer organizations establish command centers. Police and firefighters relay critical information regarding trapped individuals, structural hazards, and areas requiring immediate attention. Stories of personal survival continue to emerge, each revealing the extraordinary resilience of ordinary individuals. A receptionist trapped on the 40th floor of a nearby skyscraper recalls navigating smoke-filled corridors to reach a fire escape, using courage and ingenuity to assist colleagues who struggled with panic and disorientation. A construction worker recounts the moment he lifted debris to save a coworker pinned beneath steel beams, their hands scraped and blistered, yet alive through determination and teamwork. Every story weaves together into a collective testament to human fortitude under extreme circumstances. As evening approaches, international attention intensifies. News organizations broadcast footage of the Twin Towers remains, the Pentagon and Flight 93's crash site. World leaders express shock and condemnation, while millions of viewers around the globe bear witness to the unfolding tragedy. Countries offer condolences and support, signaling the beginning of a global response. Flags are lowered to half-mast, vigils organized, and public spaces transformed into memorials for those lost. In the aftermath, psychological trauma begins to surface alongside the physical devastation. Survivors, responders, and witnesses exhibit shock, grief, and disorientation. Mental health teams mobilize, providing counseling, stabilization, and support to those affected. Families search for missing loved ones with mounting anxiety, relying on news coverage, emergency response updates, and community networks. The human toll extends far beyond the immediate physical injuries, highlighting the broader impact of such catastrophic events on collective consciousness. The city begins the early stages of recovery, even as the scale of destruction is still being assessed. Engineers and construction crews evaluate damaged structures, marking those that are unsafe and planning for eventual clearance of rubble. Volunteers assist with cleanup, transport supplies, and provide guidance to displaced civilians. Every action, no matter how small, contributes to the larger effort to stabilize the city, save lives, and restore order in the midst of chaos. Emergency operations also extend to airports and transportation hubs nationwide. Flight cancellations, heightened security measures, and immediate reviews of airline procedures reflect the broader systemic impact. Air traffic controllers, pilots, and security personnel coordinate under intense pressure, ensuring safety while maintaining order in the national airspace. Cities across the United States respond in kind, balancing immediate public safety needs with long-term operational adjustments. In Lower Manhattan, survivors gather in temporary shelters and medical facilities. Conversations are filled with fragmented recollections of escape, fear, and witnessing tragedy. Some speak of colleagues lost, others of miraculous survival. Children, bewildered, cling to parents, while adults recount what they witnessed in attempts to process and share the experience. The psychological landscape is as complex and layered as the physical destruction, shaping the collective memory of the day. In parallel, law enforcement and federal agencies initiate investigations into the coordinated attacks. Teams from the FBI, FAA, and Department of Defense converge on New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania, collecting evidence, interviewing survivors, and reconstructing timelines. The goal is to understand the mechanisms of the attacks, identify perpetrators, and prevent future incidents. Despite the enormity of destruction, investigative processes begin immediately, emphasizing both urgency and diligence. Amidst ongoing rescue and recovery, stories of heroism continue to emerge. Firefighters, police officers, medics, and civilians push into unstable buildings, guided by training, instinct, and an unwavering sense of duty. Acts of courage, compassion, and selflessness define the unfolding narrative, creating a tapestry of humanity against the backdrop of unprecedented destruction. Each survivor rescued, each injured person stabilized, and each life preserved underscores the extraordinary response to calamity. Globally, the attacks shape international discourse. Governments convene emergency meetings, intelligence agencies initiate investigations, and world media broadcast the unfolding events to millions. Citizens in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas watch in shock, horror, and solidarity. Spontaneous memorials arise in cities far from the attacks, reflecting a collective empathy and recognition of the human cost. International response begins to take shape, signaling the start of a long-term global engagement with the implications of terrorism and security. In the hours and days that follow, Manhattan streets slowly regain functionality, though the city remains scarred. Cleanup efforts, medical care, and psychological support continue unabated. Survivors who were able to escape share their experiences, forming networks of mutual support. Firefighters and emergency personnel rotate shifts, fatigued yet unwavering, demonstrating extraordinary endurance in physically and emotionally demanding conditions. The world watches as recovery operations progress. Footage of rescue teams, volunteer efforts, and survivors emerges alongside ongoing coverage of missing persons, hospital operations, and initial political responses. Citizens, governments, and organizations around the globe respond with aid, condolences, and expressions of solidarity, emphasizing the interconnectedness of the modern world and the shared human response to tragedy. Even as night falls, Lower Manhattan remains a scene of activity. Smoke still rises from the rubble, fires smolder in pockets, and emergency crews continue their tireless efforts. Civilians assist where possible, and temporary shelters accommodate those displaced. The city is marked not only by destruction but also by courage, resilience, and determination. Each person contributing to recovery, whether professional or volunteer, embodies the human capacity to confront catastrophe and rebuild in its aftermath. Survivor stories continue to emerge in medical centers, temporary shelters, and informal gatherings. The narratives are diverse: office workers rescued from collapsing stairwells, civilians guiding the injured through streets blanketed in ash, firefighters braving unstable structures, and passengers on Flight 93 taking decisive action to save countless lives. Each story reinforces the interplay of courage, resilience, and ordinary human instincts amplified under extraordinary circumstances. At the national level, political leaders address the nation. Speeches convey grief, determination, and resolve, acknowledging the loss while signaling a broader commitment to security, justice, and response. Government agencies coordinate with local authorities, military units, and intelligence organizations to assess threats, plan recovery, and prevent further attacks. Policies are drafted, plans revised, and national attention is focused on both immediate relief and long-term security. As the days turn into weeks following September 11th, Lower Manhattan remains a city suspended between devastation and resilience. Streets are partially cleared, yet the skeletal remains of the Twin Towers dominate the skyline like mute witnesses to catastrophe. Smoke still rises in thin ribbons from pockets of smoldering debris, a stark reminder of the intense fires that consumed the building's remains. The air remains thick with dust, soot, and the faint chemical tang of scorched steel lingering in every breath. Yet amidst the destruction, human determination drives the initial stages of recovery, planning, and reflection. Emergency crews continue working tirelessly, alternating between rescue operations for those still trapped and the early recovery of remains from ground zero. Firefighters, police officers, and volunteers navigate the unstable piles of steel and concrete with precision and caution. Every creaking beam, every shifting slab of rubble demands careful assessment. One misstep could trigger secondary collapses or further injury. Rescue dogs search tirelessly alongside handlers, their noses tracking the faintest scent of life beneath layers of ash and debris. Medical personnel and mental health teams operate continuously in temporary triage centers, hospitals, and shelters. Survivors of the attacks, many traumatized both physically and psychologically, receive care, counseling, and stabilization. Families of victims struggle with the ambiguity of loss, the uncertainty of missing loved ones, and the need to navigate both grief and bureaucratic processes in the wake of unprecedented destruction. The human psyche, like the city, is forced to adapt to circumstances it has never encountered before. Meanwhile, national security agencies mobilize to address the broader implications of the attacks. The Federal Aviation Administration implements stricter flight protocols, grounded in immediate lessons from the coordinated hijackings. Air traffic patterns are revised, emergency response procedures reinforced, and intelligence agencies across the nation and world increase collaboration to identify networks, monitor potential threats, and prevent future attacks. Policies and protocols that had been theoretical become urgent and operational overnight. Across the city, workers in construction, engineering, and urban planning assess the structural stability of buildings surrounding Ground Zero. Skyscrapers with broken windows, warped steel frames, and cracked facades require detailed evaluation. Engineers employ cranes, sensors, and cutting-edge monitoring equipment to ensure that recovery operations can proceed safely. Streets partially blocked by debris are gradually cleared to allow for emergency vehicles, supply transport, and the movement of rescue and cleanup crews. In communities near the affected sites, residents provide critical support. Volunteers organize food and water distribution, shelter, and logistical assistance for displaced families and workers. Local schools, churches, and community centers become hubs of coordination and refuge. Acts of human kindness, both small and large, proliferate. Neighbors assist each other in navigating debris-strewn streets, volunteers offer transportation to hospitals, and communities rally to provide basic necessities to those struggling amidst chaos. Media coverage continues to dominate both national and international attention. Photographs of Ground Zero. The Pentagon and Flight 93's crash site circulate widely, evoking both horror and reverence. News channels document ongoing rescue operations, survivor stories, and the evolving response from local, state, and federal authorities. The imagery of devastation juxtaposed with acts of courage shapes public perception and understanding, emphasizing human resilience alongside tragedy. In the weeks following, memorialization efforts begin to emerge. Makeshift shrines and spontaneous tributes appear across New York, Arlington, and Shanksville. Flowers, candles, photographs, handwritten notes, and personal mementos mark the sites where lives were lost. Citizens and visitors gather to honor the dead, offering prayers, moments of silence, and shared reflection. These early acts of commemoration highlight the instinct to preserve memory, provide closure, and assert the significance of human life even amidst overwhelming loss. The government initiates investigations to trace the origins of the attacks, coordinate intelligence, and ensure accountability. FBI agents, CIA analysts, and law enforcement officers collaborate to identify perpetrators, reconstruct timelines, and analyze the methods employed. Evidence from Ground Zero, flight data recorders from the planes, and witness testimonies form the basis of intelligence assessments. Each fragment of information contributes to the broader understanding of a global network orchestrating the events, laying the groundwork for both immediate and long-term national security measures. Public discourse and policy debates unfold nationwide. Citizens grapple with questions of security, civil liberties, and preparedness. Emergency protocols are examined and revised. Airports and federal buildings adopt new screening and surveillance procedures, and legislative frameworks are adjusted to enhance counterterrorism capabilities. The psychological impact on the nation, fear, grief, and the drive for security, fuels both policy decisions and cultural shifts. Only by intelligence and military capabilities, but also by the understanding that individual and community action is critical in crisis mitigation. Collaborative emergency response networks are strengthened, training programs integrate case studies of 9/11 heroism, and global awareness of civilian resilience informs both planning and public engagement. In Lower Manhattan, communities continue to organize around survivor support, memorialization, and civic reconstruction. Volunteers coordinate meal distribution, shelter management, and psychological support initiatives. Public spaces are transformed into hubs for shared reflection, education, and community engagement. Survivors, responders, and citizens contribute collectively, blending personal experience with civic responsibility. These interactions reinforce the interdependence of individuals and institutions in navigating disaster recovery and legacy building. Economic recovery parallels physical and psychological rebuilding. Businesses, financial institutions, and infrastructure providers implement strategies informed by the immediate response and individual acts of heroism. Supply chains are adjusted, employee safety protocols enhanced, and contingency plans revised. The experiences of individual workers navigating collapse, assisting coworkers, and improvising under pressure inform organizational policies, demonstrating that personal courage has a tangible impact on systemic resilience. Cultural memory evolves through literature, film, and visual art. Documentaries capture first-hand accounts of civilians and responders, dramatizations explore ethical dilemmas and acts of bravery, and exhibitions preserve artifacts that symbolize both tragedy and heroism. Artists and writers interpret events through diverse lenses, creating a layered narrative that combines historical accuracy with human experience. This cultural output ensures that the lessons of 9/11 and the individual stories that compose it remain accessible, resonant, and instructive. Psychological recovery continues to be integral to long-term resilience. Mental health programs, peer support groups, and community initiatives target both survivors and responders. Children who witnessed events receive age-appropriate counseling and guidance, while adults participate in structured therapy and informal support networks. The narrative of heroism, whether through physical rescue, emotional support, or community coordination, becomes a critical component of coping strategies, reinforcing the idea that personal action can mitigate trauma and inspire hope. September 15, 2001, dawns over Washington, D.C. with a clarity that belies the tension permeating the city. Streets are quieter than usual as federal employees return cautiously to partially reopened offices, security checkpoints are heightened, and National Guard units patrol critical areas. Across the nation, airspace remains under strict control, with military aircraft and radar installations monitoring every commercial and private flight. The country has shifted into a mode of vigilant alertness, aware that the attacks on New York, the Pentagon, and Pennsylvania signify not just a singular act of terror, but a new paradigm of global vulnerability. In the immediate aftermath, intelligence agencies, FBI, CIA, NSA, and foreign partners mobilize with unprecedented urgency. Analysts sift through vast quantities of data, communication intercepts, travel records, and financial transactions. Every piece of information could reveal connections, identify operatives, or prevent further attacks. Analysts work in shifts around the clock, their faces illuminated by screens filled with code, surveillance feeds, and classified intelligence reports. Every breakthrough brings a mixture of relief and urgency, as the knowledge of imminent threats fuels both fear and determination. Simultaneously, on the ground in Afghanistan, U.S. and allied special operations teams prepare for the first coordinated strikes against terrorist strongholds. Reconnaissance reports are cross-referenced with satellite imagery, human intelligence, and previous geopolitical assessments. Every mission plan accounts for terrain, enemy capability, civilian presence, and logistical feasibility. Soldiers undergo final briefings, checking equipment, reviewing maps, and rehearsing contingencies. The human element, experience, skill, and decisiveness remains as critical as technology or firepower, a lesson reinforced by the real-time stories of heroism from September 11th. In New York, volunteers and civilians continue their critical contributions. Office workers who assisted in evacuation operations share their experiences with authorities and journalists, highlighting areas where emergency procedures succeeded or failed. Construction crews provide logistical support for recovery operations, moving debris, stabilizing structures, and assisting search teams. Even seemingly ordinary acts such as guiding injured individuals through fractured streets or delivering water and blankets to responders are cataloged as part of a broader understanding of human resilience and operational efficiency. At airports nationwide, security personnel enforce new protocols developed in response to the attacks. Passengers undergo rigorous screenings, while intelligence agencies coordinate with airport security teams to identify potential risks. Flight controllers, often working around the clock, manage altered flight paths and implement rapid communication systems to respond to unusual patterns. The lessons learned from Flight 93 and the hijacked planes drive operational decisions, emphasizing vigilance, decisiveness, and coordination between civilian and military systems. Meanwhile, families of Flight 93 passengers continue to navigate grief and emerging public recognition of heroism. The story of passengers subduing hijackers, effectively preventing further destruction, spreads nationally and internationally. Families, survivors, and community leaders share these narratives in public forums, educational programs, and media coverage. The courage displayed aboard the flight reinforces the broader theme that individual initiative can have monumental consequences, a lesson mirrored in countless acts of civilian and responder heroism during the events in New York and Washington, D.C. In Lower Manhattan, the reconstruction and memorialization processes continue. Construction crews work alongside engineers and safety inspectors to clear debris and stabilize remaining structures. Every steel beam lifted, every concrete slab cataloged, and every artifact preserved contributes to both operational knowledge and historical record. Volunteers assist by transporting supplies, maintaining temporary shelters, and providing logistical support for responders. The city functions as a living laboratory where the lessons of human courage, operational coordination, and resilience converge with reconstruction efforts. Global intelligence networks accelerate operations. Analysts coordinate with foreign governments to trace financial support, communications, and travel patterns of suspected terrorist operatives. Diplomatic channels are utilized to obtain critical information, monitor cross-border movements, and secure cooperation in apprehending suspects. International law enforcement agencies establish task forces to share information, prioritize threats, and coordinate responses to potential attacks. The interplay of human initiative and institutional strategy underscores the complexity of counterterrorism efforts. On the front lines, military operations integrate lessons learned from human behavior during emergencies. Soldiers and intelligence officers study the civilian response to the September 11th attacks, incorporating insights into situational awareness, improvisation, and rapid decision-making. Rescue operations, evacuation patterns, and the spontaneous acts of bravery by ordinary citizens inform tactical and operational planning. Each personal narrative from Ground Zero or Flight 93 becomes a case study in leadership, judgment under pressure, and the potential impact of individual initiative. In Washington, D.C., emergency planning drills intensify. Government buildings, embassies, and critical infrastructure sites implement heightened security measures. Evacuation procedures are refined, communication protocols enhanced, and contingency plans rehearsed. Federal agencies collaborate closely with local authorities to maintain situational awareness, manage civilian movement, and ensure continuity of operations. The lessons of September 11th emphasize that preparation, coordination, and the human factor are inseparable from national security strategies. Meanwhile, survivors in New York participate actively in community resilience initiatives. Office workers who assisted during the evacuations organize workshops for local schools and businesses, sharing practical tips and first-hand accounts of effective crisis response. Civilians who aided neighbors or guided responders coordinate with emergency planners to identify best practices and areas for improvement. These contributions underscore that heroism is not solely defined by physical courage, but by informed, decisive action in moments of extreme uncertainty. In Afghanistan, special operations teams execute initial strikes on terrorist compounds, guided by intelligence gathered through global collaboration. Soldiers navigate rugged terrain, coordinate with aerial surveillance, and engage in complex maneuvers designed to minimize civilian casualties while achieving strategic objectives. Each operation is informed not only by technology and planning, but also by individual skill, judgment, and adaptability, qualities exemplified by first responders and civilians during the attacks on September 11th. Psychologists and social workers extend their support to survivors and responders, integrating narratives of heroism into therapeutic interventions. Recounting experiences of courage, improvisation, and successful rescues helps individuals process trauma, reinforce resilience, and find meaning in chaos. Group sessions, individual counseling, and community outreach initiatives emphasize the importance of both remembering and learning from acts of bravery. Children, particularly those exposed to the events, participate in educational programs designed to normalize experiences while honoring heroism. Across the nation, legislative measures are enacted to enhance counterterrorism capabilities. The Patriot Act, among other measures, redefines intelligence sharing, surveillance authority, and law enforcement coordination. Debates about civil liberties, privacy, and national security shape public discourse, reflecting the tension between protection and freedom. Each policy decision is informed not just by threat assessment, but by the human dimension, the real-life acts of courage, quick thinking, and resilience that defined the September 11th response. In Lower Manhattan, the integration of reconstruction and memorialization proceeds concurrently. Architects, historians, and civic planners design spaces that honor heroism alongside tragedy, ensuring that survivors' experiences, responder bravery, and civilian contributions are enshrined in the urban landscape. Volunteers assist with cleanup, documentation, and logistical support, bridging professional and civilian efforts. The narrative of the city becomes one of endurance, innovation, and human determination, intertwining structural rebuilding with moral and cultural recovery. Internationally, intelligence and military operations coordinate in unprecedented ways. Task forces track suspect networks, monitor communications, and preemptively address threats to civilian populations. Analysts integrate field reports, surveillance data, and behavioral assessments into operational planning. Human judgment, informed by the observed heroism and improvisation of civilians and responders during the attacks, becomes central to strategy development. These lessons guide not only immediate counterterrorism efforts but the ongoing evolution of global security protocols. Cultural memory continues to evolve. Documentaries, oral histories, and media coverage highlight the human dimension of the attacks. Firefighters guiding colleagues through smoke-filled stairwells, civilians improvising evacuations, passengers on Flight 93 averting further catastrophe. Artists and writers interpret these narratives, blending historical fidelity with emotional resonance, ensuring that acts of courage are preserved alongside the broader socio-political consequences. Memorialization, both physical and cultural, reinforces the intertwining of heroism with institutional and policy evolution. Volunteers and community organizers maintain a critical role in operational support. Shelter management, supply distribution, and psychological first aid become sustained initiatives. Ordinary citizens contribute to planning exercises, simulate emergency response scenarios, and collaborate with professional agencies to refine protocols. These contributions reinforce the understanding that national security and crisis response are collaborative enterprises, reliant not only on technology or authority but on human initiative, decision-making, and moral courage. In New York, survivors' networks grow increasingly formalized. Peer support groups, educational programs, and civic initiatives harness the lived experiences of individuals who acted decisively during the attacks. Lessons learned from these personal narratives inform training, emergency planning, and community resilience programs nationwide. Every story, whether of physical rescue, psychological support, or coordination with responders, contributes to a knowledge base that enhances preparedness, strengthens community bonds, and honors human ingenuity under extreme conditions.